My name is Robyn Reed, and I'm the head of Access Services at Schaefer Library. I was able to put together an exhibit that was comprised of the things I love, that is science fiction, but also with a sort of critical angle, and that focused on sort of the race politics of science fiction and putting our stories forth into the future, and that is the Afro Future. It gives us a narrative with which we can not only identify, but also a sort of narrative of hope, and that traditionally in science fiction literature, and I look at that piece of Afrofuturism, people of color were rarely included. And you can have worlds where people are blue, and you can imagine spaceships and time travel, but you can't imagine people of color in those landscapes. So it gives us a place, not only in this world of fiction, but it also gives us incentive. It gives us ideas about where we could go in the future. So that's one of the things that I think this exhibit, not only for the representational value of having people who come into this library who are from the diaspora see images in the library that represent their identity, their background, that sort of thing, but it also gives them the ideas of what they can accomplish, and that the future is theirs as much as it is anybody else's. So for this activity, we were able to purchase, I believe, 4 first edition books from some of the greatest writers in Afrofuturism, but also just in the sort of literary world. Samuel Delaney, Octavia Butler, W.E.B. Du Bois. And so that was one wonderful thing, because one of the things that I wanted to accomplish, or we wanted to accomplish for this exhibit, was to show people we already have a lot of these resources available here in the library. Our library collection is probably as diverse as the world, but you wouldn't know it because a lot of the things that we celebrate, we recognize, don't always include people of color. So I wanted to push these resources forward, but I also wanted to increase our collections in terms of special collections. So we bought 4 first edition texts. We also were able to present speakers, experts on the topic of Afrofuturism, and Afrofuturism as a literary and speculative arts movement, but also the activism, which is a component of Afrofuturism. So we were able to present speakers who would represent the various areas of Afrofuturism. And so we had 2 speaking events, speaker events. We have an art exhibit that coincided with the Afrofuturist sort of literary and music exhibit. And we also were able to conduct a reading group, whereby I was able to facilitate discussion on essays and short stories in the Afrofuturist genre, and introduce students and faculty who maybe weren't familiar with Afrofuturism as a topic. So there's Octavia Butler. She's an African-American woman. Unfortunately, she's deceased now, but she wrote primarily during the 80s and the 90s. Her work entails not only time travel in the story Kindred, about a woman who goes back in time to meet her slave ancestors, but she also focuses a lot on power. And race is secondary, but power structures, and who has it and who does it and why. So you see that in her Pattern Mastering series. And we bought a first copy of Wild Seed an extraordinary book. We also have a first edition of Pattern Master, the first part of the series. I believe there are 5 books in that series. And she's extraordinary because she was quiet as a child and wanted so much to see the world, but also to explore other worlds. And she did it through her writing, even though she was not able as a child to travel. And then we have Samuel Delaney, who is considered one of the best science fiction authors in general. He's received the Grand Master title in science fiction literature. He's been writing since the 60s. And he's particularly interesting because not only is he an African American male, but he's also gay. And so while in his early works his characters were typically white, in part that was because of the publishing industry and what publishers would be willing to accept. But he slowly incorporated, he always had black characters or characters of color, but he slowly increased their number and was able to continue writing in that way, and then started including people with different sexual orientations. So we bought 2 first editions of Octavia Butler. We bought one first edition, Dahlgren, which is Samuel Delaney's opus max. You know, it's an extraordinary book about a dystopian world. So we bought that. And then we bought a copy of Darkwater. It's a W.E.B. Du Bois first edition, which includes 2 works of fiction. There are essays, but there are also 2 works of fiction that are considered part of the Afrofuturist genre. One is it's called The Comet, and it's a short story about a comet that destroys the people in New York City. And the only 2 survivors are a black man and a white woman. When was that written? It was written in 1921. And it explores the racial politics of moving the civilization and the human race forward with 2 people who at the time would never have been allowed to marry. I really want to make sure that we continue to celebrate the artistic and intellectual accomplishments of people of color. So I've been talking to a couple of faculty on campus about what kind of exhibit they'd like to see to celebrate the Latinx community, and quite possibly in the future Asian Americans or Asians. That's where I kind of want to go, but there are a lot of other things that I would like to do as well.